We've got a fantastic panel lined up for you today. So just checking my notes, we've got Natalie from Lloyds, Tony from Edelman, Adrian from Royce, and Paul from Duff and Phelps. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves in full when we get to the first question. And we posed some questions. We put some on the conference so that you have an idea of what we're going to talk about. And we're really going to focus on what's happening in the property FM facilities world today in the background of COVID-19. Hopefully these are very relevant questions. Please put some questions through to us. We'll hope to answer them at the end. And we've got some protocols as well. So we're going to ask most people to go on mute if that's possible, and just let the panel take the questions away as well. And I'll intervene when they run out of time, because we're a little bit time restricted. So I'm going to go to Adrian first with the first question, and the same question I will apply to all the guys. I think we need to, first of all, think about our clients and customers, the people that we look after, the people that work alongside us, and all our customers as well. And the first question is about, what do you think will be the main change in the way that our customers, our people visiting our facilities will operate in this new post-19 world? So Adrian, over to you. Perhaps you can take that away for us.
Great, okay, thank you, Peter. So, good morning, everyone. I'm Adrian Coleman from Rolls-Royce. We're the aerospace company, so we don't make the cars. At Rolls-Royce, I'm a property planning exec and also the head of the property information team. And I also sit on our 5-person property exec. Currently, we're responsible for global portfolio of just over 20 sites in 41 countries, and we've got about 28 million square feet in total. So just with this very relevant question from Peter, for us, our clients are very much our employees. We've got to make sure they stay safe. We've got to make sure that they are comfortable coming to work, and we've got to give them the best chance possible to be at their best. Now, obviously, that's very challenging in the current circumstances, and what we've seen is, especially with our portfolio, is that our challenges change depending on which part of the globe we're talking about, and very much are dependent on specifics in locations. So for us, the considerations for our office employees is very much work from home until for as long as possible. Whereas for our manufacturing facilities, that isn't really a consideration if we wish to continue. So I suppose the key thing for me is there isn't one size fits all, and it's very much dependent on who are your key customers that you're trying to keep safe and within the confines of your business operations. So I think it's going to be interesting to see, because we've got a panel here with people that have clients and staff in different industries. So it's going to be interesting just to compare and contrast.
Adrian, thank you very much. Natalie, perhaps we can come to you. You're hidden from my screen at the moment. I hope you're on video, but there you are.
I
Wonderful.
am.
So
I think when
perhaps
I
an
speak,
introduction,
I'll come up.
and tell us, what do you think your clients and customers are going to be, how they're going to be reacting as well?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Peter. So my name's Natalie. I'm the Future Workplace Director at Lloyds Banking Group. And we have a portfolio of offices focused in the UK. So we've got 100 offices across the UK and 1,700 branches. My role at Lloyds is to look at, what does the future look like? So what size and shape estate portfolio do we need in the future? What is the future of the office? How will that change over time? The types of spaces we need for colleagues to work in, and the types of things people who come into the office to do. And obviously, as a bank, we are an essential service. So from the beginning of the crisis, we have been operating for our customers whenever that we're there for them, to support them with their financial needs. So we've got around 10,000 colleagues that are going into our offices every day and have been since the beginning of the crisis. That might be because they're answering phones to customers to help them with their finances, for example. We've got around 15,000 colleagues that work in our branches, and all of those branches have been operational as much as they can over the last 3 months. And then 50,000 people that are working from home. So we've enabled way more people to work from home than were previously, and we're now trying to understand, what does that look like on a long-term basis. So that's my role, kind of how do I think the future, the workplace will change in the future. We've obviously seen a massive focus over the last few months on hygiene, space, cleaning, and making sure we adhere to social distancing guidelines. And I think those focus areas will continue, and there's almost going to be a heightened focus on hygiene and cleaning. So some facilities management kind of service lines, I guess, will increase in focus. But then for our catering partners, because we've got no one going into offices and kind of buying their cups of coffee that they used to get. So I think we'll see quite a shift in the types of services that we offer from a facilities management perspective. And I think there's just going to be a massive cultural shift. Paul and I were saying it just before the panel started, we can't imagine a world where we commute 2 hours to go to an office to sit on video conferences and calls all day. So I think the types of activities that people do when they go into an office are going to be very different, and there'll be much more flexibility in how and when and where people work. And I think that our office spaces will need to change to accommodate that.
Natalie, thank you very much. I just noticed it's lunchtime behind you. The cat's just turned up.
Yeah, they like making an appearance.
Just to warn you all, if the cat might jump on my chair as well. So isn't it strange that we're working in so different places at the moment? But it's working for us, isn't it? Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to move across to Paul now. So Paul, your introduction, please, and how do you think your customers and clients are going to be working in this new world?
Thanks, Peter. So as an introduction, my name's Paul Eakins. I'm the Global Head of Real Estate and Facilities for Duff and Phelps. For those of you who don't know, Duff and Phelps is a global advisory firm. We specialize in finance, governance, risk, and cyber security, compliance consulting, and valuation advisory. Our portfolio, Peter, is a global one. We have 110 offices span across the globe with a square footage of just over 1 million square foot. And so, as you can quite imagine, this pandemic has presented us with a number of challenges that I think all our panel and indeed those people listening in are probably been grappling with as well. Our constituents are very similar to what Adrian mentioned, are the employees of Duff and Phelps and those who come to visit our offices. And what has been paramount from the start of this, from our executive committee downwards, is the safety of those. At one point in time, 99% of our employees were working remotely. And as you can quite imagine, with a portfolio as geographically diverse as ours, that happened at different times as the pandemic kind of moved from east to west. But I think what our clients really have valued over this time, and it's really becoming now as we're starting the transition from 99% of our guys working at home to kind of starting slowly to come back into the office in those areas where it's safe. It's giving them confidence that we have done all that we can do to make that transition safe, because there's a lot of anxiety about that. And there's stuff that, as real estate and facilities professionals, we cannot control. So that, how you get to the office and what that journey entails. So what we've tried to do as a company, we're in a position of really having businesses that don't require people to come in. So that's our starting point. We see the value of the office, and that's going to continue. The ability to network, the ability to coach, the ability to collaborate, none of that's going to go away. We've been doing it superbly well virtually, but we're all missing that human contact. So at the right time, we need to get back in and start working as we did. But in order to give our colleagues that confidence, we're hosting country-specific town hall calls. We're producing a protocol document for every office is a very in-depth document that tells them everything they can expect from the minute they walk through, the office door. And our offices are typically multi-tenanted. So how will the reception work? Where will they be able to sit? What PPE will be available to them? What measures are we taking in terms of cleaning and sanitization? And we're presenting that document on the town hall. We're giving it to our colleagues, and that seems to be working very well. We've made a commitment to our folks that we're going to embrace remote working at least until the end of the year. But our offices, we have a level structure, and our offices will slowly start migrating back to the office. I mean, in APAC, they're all but there. Beijing had a kind of jump back last week. And then as you come through mainland Europe and the UK, we're really starting to get, a low occupancy back in, and the Americas will follow suit. So it's really just about trying to give our colleagues confidence that we're thinking of everything we possibly can. And should they have any concerns, we're really kind of operating an open model where they can contact us and let us know, what concerns they might have. Because some people have specific health issues that we need to be aware of as well. And it's very individual, the return to the office.
Paul, thank you very much. Yeah, interesting. When I was working at Nestle last year, we were having this discussion about the whole journey and how we managed to have people from home to home, really. Can we make that whole thing so much easier for them and make their life at work or even outside work a little easier as well? And it's become more pertinent, clearly, as we've moved into this new scenario. I'm going to move now to Tony. Tony from Edelman. Tony, perhaps you'd like to introduce yourself, and then we can kick into the same question, which is about our customers and clients.
I'm Antony Wiltshire. Good morning, everybody. First of all, I'm Antony Wiltshire. I'm the Director of Workplace in the UK and Ireland. Edelman.
Tony, we're struggling a little bit to hear.
Let me shout a little bit more. Maybe.
Oh, perfect.
Right.
Perfect. Yes, great.
So I'm the Director of Workplace in the UK and Ireland for Edelman. Edelman's the largest PR company in the world that no one's ever heard of. We look after some quite large clients like Xbox, Microsoft, Shell, lots of pharmaceutical companies, and we're based in central London, so we obviously have an extra challenge, which is everybody getting into the office. We've got about 600 staff, and we're one of 67 offices around the world. Some of those offices have come back, but not very many yet. Quite a few offices in the US as well, and we're the second largest at the moment. So for us, really, our approach is always that we see everybody as a client. Obviously, we're dealing with clients like our normal office clients, but also all of our staff are serving the clients. So effectively, we deal with everybody like they're a client. And obviously, what we realised at the beginning of March was that suddenly we've gone from looking after a couple of offices in London and Dublin into sort of 600 remote offices around the UK. So that became quite an interesting challenge to start off with. But really, I suppose for us, obviously the last couple of months have been about preparing the office, making sure that we're ready to get people back. A lot of it's been about reassuring people that we're doing all the right things, going through all the government guidelines, making sure that things are the way that they need to be for when people come back. And also, behind the scenes, actually trying to reimagine what the purpose of the office is. And I know that we're going to be talking about this a little bit later on, but really trying to understand what it is that people are going to want to come back for. And one of the things that we've noticed, and this is interesting, particularly with some of our younger members of staff, is that the office is almost like a comfort blanket for a lot of people. They just like to know that it's there. And of course, and I'm sure every organisation's had this, we've got lots of members of staff who are perhaps working their notice employers, and they've joined us now, and this is the only way that they've met their colleagues so far. So the idea of actually getting people back into the office and people to actually meet sometimes for the first time is quite an important thing really for us. So those are the sort of the big things really for us at the moment, the big ticket items, trying to get everybody sorted out, get everybody ready to come back, and obviously reassuring people is a really important part of it.
Tony, thank you very much We just had a Q&A come in, actually. A question came in, which I'm not going to ask everyone to address immediately, but I think we need to think about it along the way. So Wendy, thank you very much indeed for your question. She's the first one that's put one on the Q&A. And the question is, I'm wondering how the panel feel about making decisions in this bubble of time where it's not been reflective of real life. No distractions, firmly fixed to being home, and how to reflect on this and any long-term decisions when life gets back to reality, which is going to be much more like what we had in the last 3 or 4 months. So maybe as we're addressing some of the topics we can speak to, and back to this question at the end to see if we've managed to adequately answer it for you. So, but we're going to move on to the next topic, which was about us being on point. I remember this well, being on point to look and adjust our workplaces to make them smarter in the new world. And I'm thinking now, in the light of what we've been through in the last 3 or 4 months, what our board members will be thinking about our workplaces today and maybe in the next couple of years. Do you think they're going to be thinking differently? And what do you think those changes might be? I did ask the panel to think about 3 big changes, but what do you think the board are going to be thinking about now in terms of changing our workplaces for us to be much more smarter operators in the future? I'm going to go to Paul first this time round. So Paul, perhaps you can lead off with this one.
Sure, thanks, Peter. I think this is a really interesting point because I think, I think we'll see that actually, certainly true of Duff and Phelps board. They have always been very engaged in real estate and facilities and what that can add to the business, and they've been very open to adapting industry trends. But I would say that this pandemic has really to the workplace in a way that perhaps that they hadn't thought about it before. And so before answering your question, I think one of the positive things as a real estate and facilities professional we can take from this, and it is taking the advantage of the airtime that we're going to get within our organization to really try and push through change. And I think lots of people are receptive to that, certainly more so now than they probably were before the pandemic hit. But in relation to your particular question, Peter, how our board are thinking about space is really we're accelerating a program of efficiencies that we had started some 18, 24 months ago. And we're a company who have been on an acquisition run and still are really young companies, for the last 5 years. And what that has resulted within our real estate is that we have had lots of new offices coming on board in some locations where there's duplicates, and we were looking, there's a lot of consolidation going on. And in doing that consolidation, we're always looking for some ways, for efficiencies, both in space and in cost, obviously, but also to see how we can improve the environment for our colleagues. What is absolutely clear as a result of the pandemic is that we now have, a mandate that we can accelerate that. We have a buy-in not only from our executive committee, but also from senior leaders within the business that this is the right thing to do. I think the offshot here is that we are focused as a real estate and facilities team on being able to look at our square footage, understand how much we need, but also really change the way in which we use our space. So if you think about the mobility of our workforce and what we've experienced over the last 3 months, what we want to do, on the long-term plan is migrate from a fixed state really to one that is much more agile and flexible. And I guess we'll come on a little bit more to Wendy's point, because I think her question transcends so much of what we're going to speak about now, because COVID-19 it's a moment in time. But none of us know how long that moment in time is going to last. It could be, obviously, as in medicine, will dictate that, whether that's 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, and we'll experience the kind of, we've already talked about the planning that we're going in, that we're all doing, and that's really for the short term. All of the measures that we're putting in our office right now are is to get our people back in, there'll be social distancing. But what about the long term? And I think what we're very keen to do is not get caught up with the pandemic right now and plan, and let that be our kind of 10-year plan. But what we certainly are going to do is use it, as a result to kind of remind people of their behaviours during this 3 months and how successful we have been remotely, and really kind of fostering that as we go on. I think one final point here is that we've all I think throughout my network, I've spoken to people in the industry. Remote working and working from home during this pandemic has by and large been extremely successful for most people. Most companies have been able to navigate that very well. It's really important to know that what we've experienced for the last 3 months in working from home is not going to be the same for when this pandemic is over. We've all been working 7 days a week at home, with some of us with our children homeschooling. But this experience is not going to be reflective when we're back in the office. We can adopt a work from home culture, but it will mean that people will come in maybe 1 or 2 days a week, or they have the option, the flexibility. It won't be like it has been in the pandemic. So the executive committee are very, very open to adapting changes. We're already talking about bringing online new technologies in terms of booking systems we can put lots of COVID stuff in there about making sure that desks have been cleaned and it shows on the booking system. There's lots of things that they're very, very open to as a result of the pandemic, which is great. But the final point I would say is that, I'm really excited about the ability to use this as a positive and drive that change quicker than I probably would have already been able to do so.
Paul, thank you very much. I'm going to go to Tony. Tony, it looks like you actually might be in the office, not unless you've had air conditioning fitted in your lounge, but you'll answer that question. What's your board thinking about at the moment?
Okay, yes. Well, the answer is yes, I am in the office. Obviously, I've been coming in quite a lot as we've been getting the place ready. And yes, I'm back in the office. And we are finding that we are getting 1 or 2 staff coming in on certain days now. So we're starting to ease people in a little bit. But I think we're going to probably open in the next couple of weeks. So really for us, we're actually coming to the end of a lease anyway. And when I say coming to the end of a lease, it's still a couple of years away. But this has been quite an interesting experience for us for 2 reasons. One of them is because obviously we're coming to the end of the lease, so we have to be mindful that any changes that we implement now have got to make sense for us to do, given that we've only got a short length of time left to go. And the other thing is that we've got to think very carefully about how we're going to operate in 2022. Now, clearly, what I think is very, very important for everybody to do now is to consider that the last 10 or 11 weeks of craziness is not something that you can then use to implement your future property strategy. That just does not make any sense at all. But at the same time, you obviously need to consider how people's expectations will change around what's happening with work. So really, for us, we've got some fundamental questions, which is, what's an office? Why do you want to come in? And what is it you need from us in order to achieve whatever you need to do? So I think technology is going to play a really big and important role with that. And I think really an office really is about congregation and people coming together. So it could be brainstorming, it could be just teams coming and meeting together. But where in the past what we were doing, we were pushing for agile working, and we've thought quite a lot about the whole piece around agile working, and obviously people are very, very anxious about the idea of hot desks. So clearly, we won't be looking at hot desks. That's clearly not going to happen. But interestingly, I think that the future actually will be much more about agile working, agility, than it is at the moment. So for us, looking 2 years down the line, we're probably going to be post-vaccine. It's going to be a different way for people to work. And I think that actually we could end up in a situation where it's hot desk on steroids, really. It could be really quite extreme hot desking, but very much moving away from the idea of individual departments sitting together, and for us, probably more around the idea that the office will be somewhere where you come to meet colleagues, You can book yourself a desk to come and sit down. You can either sit with your team members, or you're coming in because your team are going to be having a town hall or a group meeting at somewhere. So really for us, technology is a very, very important part of it. And we have to look very clearly at obviously what's happened at the moment, but looking at further down the line, because you can't base a 5 or 10 year property strategy on the last 11 weeks of craziness.
Tony, thank you. I'm going to go to Adrian. Adrian, are you getting a bit more airtime with your board, and are they throwing some thoughts and ideas, or is it just too early at the moment to understand?
Yeah, it's a very interesting sort of question, really, and certainly what Tony and Paul have just been saying really resonates with us, because we only last year published our 2030 strategy, which saw us moving to a more agile working environment and concentrating on the employee experience. And one of the few pluses from this awful pandemic is that it has huge numbers of our employees to work remotely, whether they liked it or not. For us to get that sort of buy-in, to get people to try, would have taken years. And now we've got people, albeit in exceptional circumstances, and it's only 2 or 3 months, but people now have a much more informed opinion on what it is like to work from home. Now, some of us, like myself, would work from home regularly anyway. But the vast majority of colleagues were used to going to an office 5 days a week, sit down at a desk. They may leave the desk to eat and for 1 meeting or 2 meetings a day, and then they go back to the desk for the rest of the 8 or 10 hours or whatever, and then they'd go home. Whereas now they've got a good understanding of, well, actually, can I avoid that hour's commute? Can I actually be a bit more flexible? Oh, and actually my employer is perhaps actually encouraging me to think about my work-life balance, because it's a bit more acceptable to actually work more agile and more flexibly. And yeah, that's going to be for us of our longer term journey is going to be a real plus for us, because a lot of our premises are they're in smaller cities, on the side of cities. Yeah, so a lot of our employees, not only are they long-serving employees, but yeah, they haven't been working in city centres. So the majority of them have had for the last 5, 10 years or whatever, a certain view on what working means. Now all of a sudden they've an alternative view, and it's a view where if we can now push this employee experience, we can improve on what we're doing to support our employees, whether it be in the current climate. There's a big emphasis on mental health, and the challenges that are facing people who perhaps are working from home. Some people working from home are very lucky. They can have a separate office. They've got a garden. They can walk around every hour or so. Other people have got kids all over them, the dining room table, etc., etc. So there's lots of different challenges. We've seen the technology guys, especially in our company, have really stepped up. Week 1 we had 3 times as many people trying to access remotely as we could cope with, and within 2 weeks that was all sorted. And that was sort of exceptional. So supporting employees while they're out and about, working from home. We're increasing the communications. We're making sure all our managers speak of their team every week. There's a lot more understanding as to, oh, blimey, hang on a minute, my son or daughter's just come in, or the cat's just jumped on me, or whatever else. Actually, that's quite refreshing, actually, because sometimes, especially in corporates, it can all get a bit stiff. So for us, the longer term journey, this has been a great eye opener for a lot of people, and we're now looking to build off that by saying, how can we get everyone back in the offices as quickly as possible? We're looking to push the agenda to say, right, let's think about whether you need to come back to the office, and if you do, how often is it? So we are expecting to not open as many offices as we used to have.
Adrian,
Because
thank you very
people
much.
will want to do something a bit different because it suits them as well as fitting in with the business.
Okay. And I'm hoping you're right there with the board persuading them. So Natalie, how's it been for your board, and what are they thinking about, and have they coped as well? Let's not forget them as well, and keeping in contact with them is really important. So how's it been for them, and what do you think they're going to be thinking about for the next couple of years?
Yeah, it's good timing actually, because we went and spoke to them today about our property strategy and what we're thinking about the way people are working in the future. So definitely it feels like property, workplace, ways of working has never been as interesting for the board from our perspective. And we were already writing and developing a new 10-year strategy. So in some ways this has come at a really awful situation, has come in at a really good time, because it's accelerated the way that people work probably by 5 years, and technology, we've rolled out way more laptops and enabled more people to work remotely than we ever thought was possible. So we were already developing a new strategy, and this has almost just made us think about that slightly differently with a slightly different lens. So one of the things, I think there were some questions on the Q&A around kind of making sure you're making the right long-term decisions. At the moment, all we're looking to do is accelerate, similar to Paul, the contents and kind of site exits that we were already planning pre-COVID, so that we're almost assuming that everyone carries on working the same and we don't bring our capacity down too low. And then for the long term, we're looking at kind of what are the different options of how people will work in the future. So we've developed a set of work styles that we've looked at, the different roles across the organisation, from someone that works in a call centre through to someone that works in a project team. How might those people work in the future, and what's the right balance of working from home versus in the office we think is relevant? And we now need to start overlaying on that, you know, what are people's preferences, because two people doing the same job might have completely different preferences of where they want to work. And then what about their situation? So for some of our colleagues, and I'm sure for many of you in your organisations, there's people that don't have the luxury of a space to work in. They're working maybe in a shared house, for those in London, around a shared kitchen table, and it's not very sustainable from a health and wellbeing perspective. So we're starting to offer wellbeing desks in some of our key locations across the UK, where people can book to go in desk for a day or a week at a time, and that's almost like in letting us test the concept of desk booking, which I know a few of the others talked about. So there's some stuff we're doing in the short term, I guess, to help us test how our long-term strategy might change. And then any decisions we're making around consolidations are based on what we thought before COVID, just to make sure we make the right decisions. And I think similar to what Adrian was saying, this has really caused us to think about the way that technology, people strategy and property strategy, and so we're starting to think about how those three things might join forces. And I know organisations like BT have done this as well, to almost kind of join up a future of work programme to make sure that we have the right support for people, give them the right environment to work in, and the right kit and tech to use to allow them to work as efficiently as possible. So yeah, definitely there was loads that I was kind of nodding away to when the others were talking. It was quite comforting to know that we're all thinking about the same things.
Natalie, in fact, I'm going to keep with you, Natalie, because I'm going to take a chance now just to have a look at some of the questions that the audience has put through to us. And maybe you can help us with a question that came in from Simon Hunt. How do you see the challenge of managing visitors in receptions before we get a vaccine? Is the answer tape and screens, or there are better solutions out there? And I guess with all of your outlets, which you're looking at, there might be some answers. Can you help?
Yeah, so at the moment we've said kind of essential visitors only, so only trying to restrict the amount of visitors you do have open. In the future, I think there's a real place for technology in reception. So, you know, when you go to the doctors and you put your date of birth in and it kind of alerts the doctor that you're there, how do we get to more of an environment like that where we use smart technology in a better way to enable us to maintain safe social distancing? I think at 12:30, when Boris makes his announcements about potentially social distancing restrictions being changed, that might enable us to make sure we do maintain alignment to government guidance in receptions. But I think there's a massive opportunity with technology to help us with that in the future. And in the short term, we might have to use, the more tactical options like tape and screens, or use technology that we already have available, or restrict the amount of visitors that are coming on into your offices.
Okay, fine. Tony, I'm going to ask you a question that's coming from Nathan. So, what have each of your companies done to support colleagues that are used to being in the office to adjust to working from home?
Okay, so obviously what happened when everybody moved out, there was a little bit of a slight amount of shell shock when people suddenly had to use the technology at home. But we've got Microsoft Teams, Office 365, and we did do a couple of trial days before Boris made his big announcement. So we stress tested everything before the button was pressed. I mean, there are a few things to consider. I mean, one of the things that's really important is you've got to think about people working from home. And we've got some staff for whom the closest thing they've got to a chair at home is their toilet. And obviously you've got other people who are perhaps might be in multiple occupancy, and there might be 4 or 5 people who are all scrabbling to try and use that same communal table. We had somebody else who was literally sitting on the end of her bed with her laptop on her dressing table, and clearly people like that, they can't possibly work effectively when that's the level of equipment they've got. So yes, what we've done in all those who got them to raise a help desk ticket, then we've reached out, we've gone through the health and safety HSE guidelines. We've done our best to support those people. Sometimes we sent them out kits. Sometimes it's some simple tips and tricks to help them to work more effectively. Taking lots of breaks is another really important thing. But clearly, all the usual things about trying to elevate your monitor, ideally having a separate keyboard and a mouse, actually having a desk and a chair would be quite useful, or a table and a chair would be quite useful. So we've done what we can to support people however we can.
Okay.
And I noticed there was another question actually that somebody had raised, so I'll just quickly address that one.
Well, from Gary.
From Gary, that's it.
Yeah, okay.
So just to quickly sort of clarify that, we've got about 600 staff. So far on a couple of days we've had, I think the most we've had is 3 members of staff came in for a morning. We've got another 3 coming in tomorrow. They're all within the same team, but they are very much socially distancing. So we're not by any means flooding public transport with Edelman staff at the moment. But I believe that what's going to happen, obviously we're waiting for Boris's announcement, how confusing that will be, we'll see. But what we're expecting at the moment is that offices and call centres will be sort of phase 3, and our suspicion is that's going to be the 6th of July. But what we won't be doing is we won't be opening and giving an instruction to staff to come back. Very much for us, it's about the office is available, it's COVID secure, it's an invitation. So if you choose to come back to the office, that's absolutely fine. If you choose not to come back, that's absolutely fine. For us, it's very much about if all you're going to do if you come into the office is sit on your laptop, send emails and calls, well, frankly, why do you need to come into the office? So, those are the sort of fundamental questions that we're really very much saying to the staff at the moment. And we haven't given an instruction to the staff yet for when the office will reopen. But my suspicion is that's probably the 6th of July. I suspect that will be what it is, Boris permitting.
And I noticed there's a number of actually streamer questions coming in about health and safety. It's obviously in the front of everybody's mind in terms of how to deal with it. And we'll come back to some of those questions, but I've got another. I will just ask
one more thing.
Please do.
Personal, which is that as far as the health and safety guidelines go, if you look on the health and safety executive, they are to a certain extent giving people the benefit of the doubt for people who are working from home. But my suspicion, and I think what's absolutely essential, is that you need to always do whatever is reasonably practicable to support anybody who's working remotely. So you've got to show that you've given people guidelines on how to best to work safely, that if someone's reached out because they've got some kind of a medical condition, absolutely you need to do what you need to do, because we're all in the situation where could leave the company and then come back 2 or 3 years down the line and say, while you made me work from home, and of course it's our responsibility, we're letting them do that, you didn't provide me with the right level of support, and now I'm unable to, my back is constantly bad, and it's specifically during COVID. So I think, irrespective of what HSE and the government guidelines are saying at the moment about slightly turning a blind eye on how you support people, just do what you can, because there won't be any litigation. Mine is that in 2 or 3 years' time, if we haven't all done very good due diligence over the last 10 weeks, and you really need to, then these things will come back and they will bite you. So absolutely, make sure that you look after everybody who's working remotely. It's absolutely essential. Okay,
Tony, thank you very much. Conscious of time, we've got a couple of other questions to cover, so maybe the next question we can cover off fairly quickly across the panel. I'm going to go to Natalie this time first. Natalie, and the question was, how do you think we will see a change in our support services? And there's going to be a huge change here. What do you think it's going to be for our outsourcing partners, and some of those going to struggle as well? So, Natalie, over to you with that question.
Yeah, it's a really interesting time for our partners who provide facilities management services in our offices. And at the moment, they're obviously feeling a lot of uncertainty around what this means for the future for them. So I can see at the moment kind of cleaning, as we've talked about, is going up the agenda. So there's a massive opportunity there to offer increased cleaning services and make sure that we're really providing that comfort that we've talked about for people using offices. I think if you think about catering, we might see a real drop in the amount of catering services provided, and I know some of our providers are already thinking quite creatively about what service offering they might be able to support for people working locally from home. So could they start offering some kind of services for colleagues who are working remotely? So I think we'll see a real shift in the services that we offer in our offices, but it will almost kind of just change the demand profile across the different service lines. I think we'll start to see in the future that maybe offices become a little bit more like meeting centres, conference centres, hotel lobby type areas, rather than a bunch of desks, and the types of services that you need to provide for those types of uses of an office are quite different for people that are just coming in and sitting at a desk all day. So I definitely don't know exactly what that's going to look like yet, but I think it is going to be quite challenging for some of our facilities management in terms of making sure that they right size the different services that we offer in each of our offices.
Natalie, thank you very much. Adrian, what about you? Complete, in the industrial world as well, I think it's going to be different for you in terms of your outsourced partners and their services.
Yeah, very much so. Would echo what Natalie was saying there. On catering, catering's just stopped for the majority of our locations for the last 3 months. And when it comes back, well, at what level is to me, and is it going to be at very variable depending on the day of the week, almost, with perhaps the majority of people trying to work from home on a Friday or a Monday or whatever. So very difficult to predict what the medium to longer term will be, but one thing I think that we've certainly seen on all of our manufacturing sites is a real appreciation of our staff of what our FM partners have been doing to keep them safe and to keep them working as best they can. And that has been really great to see. The wider community has been appreciating what these key people have been doing in the workplace, which has been excellent. So difficult to predict the future, but I think the other thing that really Natalie touched on, which I'd also, we're not really sure what each of our offices is going to be used for in the future, and perhaps there is going to be a lot more of a social element. If people don't want to get their heads down for 8 hours of solid work, well, perhaps they may stay at home if they can and do that. When they come in, perhaps they do want to be a bit more sociable, so they do want somewhere nice to sit with some colleagues and to have something nice to eat, or a coffee, or whatever. So yeah, can get quite excited about how the workplace may actually become a bit more social in the media once we get over the current COVID-related challenges.
Adrian, thank you. Paul, you were nodding away there. How do you think it's going to change for your outsourced suppliers?
Well, I'm nodding in complete agreement with Adrian, and in that how we should really recognise how integral these third-party contractors are to all of our businesses, and the phenomenal job that they've done throughout this crisis. If you look at, if you consider cleaning companies for one, whilst our offices have not been occupied for a period of time, they've been on. Particularly my experience has been they've been available. They've helped with the equipment, they've helped with the timing of getting back into the office and getting our offices ready. So absolutely, integral really to the kind of health and safety of our employees when they go back. And I think if you look also at that, maintenance companies as well, we are going to see higher standards required of testing of what air quality we have in our offices. And I think all of those kind of outsourced companies, particularly for Duff and Phelps, are going to play an integral part in that. Look, I mean, Adrian alluded to this. It's incredibly difficult to see, the long-term impact on these companies as we kind of adapt to the new norm. But I think certainly in the short term, what is clear is there's going to be a lot of eyes on them, and to date they've done a fantastic job, certainly for us.
Okay. Thank you very much. And then, who have I missed? Tony.
Well, for us, we have on-site catering, and clearly that's going to be much more geared up around grab and go. Won't be providing in meeting room hospitality, so teas, coffees, things like that. It's going to be very much effectively. It will be the idea of sort of mugs and things like that being around the office, I think really are going to go. We're trying to sort what we've sourced, recyclable cups. We're making sure that we're not using single-use plastics and so on, but we will be really very much encouraging people to grab and go stuff, and there won't be catering in the same way. Clearly, if you're a cleaning contractor, as long as you followed all the guidelines and that you're becoming more of a specialist in how to deal and how to react suddenly if there is an outbreak in the office, those are the sort of things I think which are going to be absolutely critical, and everyone's going to be looking at. And services, it's going to be a much harder ride for them, unfortunately. And certainly for the short term, I can't imagine that we'll have catering in the same way probably until next year.
Tony, thank you. Okay. I'm having a think about the questions here. We're going to try and cover those off at 12:30 for 15 minutes. So we're going to get through most of those. And I think if we miss any questions, probably what we'll try and do is get some of the panel to answer those, perhaps through email or some response anyway. So please don't think we're going to ignore your questions. Two more quick fire rounds. The first one is around budgets, and I'm going to go to Adrian first. Our thinking was that with many businesses perhaps finding this is going to be a very tough year and their profits diminishing, do we think there's going to be a big change in FM budgets, or do you think the funds will be moved and used elsewhere in our portfolio, or maybe across the business as well? So, Adrian.
Yeah, very interesting question. Because of the uncertainty we have, we were looking at scenarios which said, well, if we follow cleaning regime A, it's going to cost us £1 million a year extra in the UK. If we follow cleaning regime B in the UK, it's going to cost us an extra £7 million a year in the UK. Now, there's a lot of difference there for ostensibly the same result, keep people safe. And that's the challenge we're facing with budgets at the moment, is to how do we keep people safe, and the cost will be the cost. In terms of going forward, though, and the slightly longer term, we're certainly looking at, right, okay, is the budget that we had in the past still relevant? So is the standard of service that was given to our employees at each location, was it appropriate for the need? Those needs are going to change, and so the cost benefit's going to change as well. But we all know really the biggest cost of a property is actually having the property in the first place. And so what we perhaps will see is that we will have less offices, but we'll spend more, let's say, per square foot on those offices, because we've got less of them. And of course, I'm sure, overall the budget will, probably a bit is today, but we might actually, because we're having a more agile workplace, we may be able to actually justify and get support for spending a little more to make sure that the employee experience really is top notch for people who are choosing to come in.
Adrian, thank you. Tony, what's your thinking on budgets?
Yes, for us, obviously, property is the most expensive bit. Obviously, staff costs are very high as well. And then after that, our next highest bill is catering. Clearly, that catering bill is going to drop down because we won't be operating in the same way with catering. But really, what we've been doing for the last 10 or 11 weeks, as we've been finding our feet, following the guidance and preparing the office for reoccupation, we've just done what it takes. And I think that absolutely there's going to be much more of a focus around cleanliness, those sort of things than there has been in the past. But you know what? I think that the other bit that's really important for us to remember is we can put all the rules and regulations in place and have all of the additional cleaners and everything like that. But it's going to be how people, it's their conduct, how they conduct themselves in the office, which is going to make a really significant change. And yes, so cleaning, things like that are going to certainly going to go up, but we've got an absolute willingness from the board to do whatever it takes. In fact, some of our senior leaderships are really quite anxious about coming back and just making sure that it is absolutely right. And we're happy that we are there now. So we're in a good position. We're just waiting for that nod from the government.
Okay, thanks, Tony. Paul, just quickly, what's your thinking on budgets?
Yeah, I think the upfront readiness to invest and making sure our offices are safe, absolutely complete buy-in, do what you need to do. Long term, I very much agree with what Adrian was saying. I think ultimately we are going to see some significant savings on our portfolio as we look at kind of space utilization. But again, we're going to see probably an increase in our CapEx savings to make those space adapt to the new normal and support that agile and flexible working. So two things to it: upfront invest, do you need long term. I think it's probably going to balance out between the savings on the rent against CapEx expenditure.
Okay, thank you for that, Paul. And Natalie, are you getting any pressure from your outsourced suppliers and your support services because of their budgets and clearly their profits as well?
Probably more pressure internally, to be honest, from our board to say how can we beat back some of the money we're spending on additional cleaning and PPE and all of the kind of one-off costs. So we're looking at the moment at how we can mitigate some of that by keeping more of our building hibernating, accelerating some of the exits of those offices, as I spoke about earlier, similar to Paul. So yeah, I think it's how do you drive as much value as you can out of the money you're spending in the short term, then what decisions can you make in the medium and long term that are going to help mitigate some of those costs. And then also I think kind of the supply chains might calm down a little bit now. So at first, we were trying to find thousands and thousands of items of PPE for our colleagues in branches. We were trying to find endless supplies of hand sanitizer, which was like gold dust. And so that probably drove costs up in supply chains. So we're hoping that kind of things return to some kind of sense of new normal. we'll be able to think about the value that we're getting in the money we're spending on some of our essential supplies, I guess.
Natalie, thank you. Okay, so it comes to the very last, and this is a final quickfire round of questions to enlighten all of our everyone that's joined us today. And you all get 45 seconds on this, and I want to know what all of the panelists are personally going to be up to in the next 6 weeks. And that's in work and play as well. I'm going to go first to Paul, I think. What do you think your priority is going to be socially and professionally in the next 6 weeks, Paul?
Well, so professionally, we'll continue on the kind of getting our offices back up and ready. And it's like everyone here on the panel and listening in, I imagine it's been an insanely busy period. So that's not going to go away. And look forward to the challenges. At home, my goodness, well, I have a week's holiday booked in beautiful Cornwall. It was booked before the pandemic. We did it. So I'm looking forward to spending a week in Padstow in Cornwall with the family, and then navigating the craziness that is having 2 young children at home whilst both myself and my wife have full-time jobs. The summer's coming up. What are we going to do? I'm getting stressed even speaking to you about it now, Peter, but I'm sure we'll find a way. It's likely not to be like the Waltons, more like the Adams family, but I'm sure we'll find some fun along there at some stage.
Oh, very well done, Paul. Love your answer. Natalie, over to you.
Yeah, of course. At work, as Paul said, getting people back into the office safely and making sure that we're focused on their health and safety as a priority. Further developing our new strategy, which I think after today, after we spoke to the board, will be under increasing pressure to kind of deliver quickly. And then outside of work, similarly, I think as all of us probably have been under a lot of pressure over the last 3 months, and it felt a bit crazy, and lots of my friends have developed new hobbies and learnt new skills, and I've had no time to do any of that. So I'm looking forward to a week off in a couple of weeks, and maybe doing a bit of kite surfing or paddleboarding, because I live on the south coast and I keep seeing everyone doing it at lunchtime or in the evening, and I don't have time. So I'm looking forward to that, getting out on the water.
That sounds wonderful. And Natalie, we're going to ask you if you can move your camera back, because we've seen the cat as well. And I know you've
oh, they've gone out now. They've gone
purposely moved it the other way. So, no, some great ideas. Who are we going to go next? Adrian, so what's on your list to do for the next 6 weeks?
Okay, next 6 weeks. Yeah, probably for socially, really looking forward to getting together with friends. Being able to share a pint and a barbecue with them, and get back to a bit more of that sort of interaction with people not using technology. So fingers crossed that we'll be allowed to do that legally as very soon. Work, not. The next 6 weeks, we're going to be needing to keep up with what the guidance is from the government. It's going to be evolving. We don't know when or how. We've got some ideas. So we need to keep making sure that we're up to speed on that we're keeping looking after our employees, and trying to balance the government advice, the needs and wants of our employees, and also then what our business critical things are as well. So we're also increasingly now looking at, right, how is the new norm, say next year onwards, how is it going to translate into our portfolio in the longer term? The size, the shape and the location of what we may or may not need, and to start building up some of those plans.
Adrian, thank you very much. And last but not least, Tony, your next 6 weeks, what are they going to be filled with?
Okay, well, obviously getting everybody back, I think is, whoever wants to come back safely, starting to adjust to the new normal, whatever that happens to be, obviously keeping in line with whatever the guidance is that comes from the government, and really diving headfirst into the next office project, because that one's coming up, and obviously we've got to reflect on what's happened and how the business is going to be operating. And then personally, I like climbing up mountains. So the Lake District or Snowdon is beckoning at the moment. I just want some sunshine and the ability to go there without being stopped and turned back by the police would be good. So that's really what I want to do. Up a hill, somewhere sunny.
Thank you, Tony. as well. I'm a great outside person as well, and I think for me, professionally, I actually left my last employer, Nestle, at the end of last year. I was hoping for a bit of consultancy. Of course, nobody wants me at the moment, so they're all keeping me well away. So I don't know whether it was my skill set, or my visibility, or just the period of time. The other thing I'd love to do, and I should have been doing this week actually, I should have been sailing. So I should have been in the Greek islands. To Greece. It'd be great if I can get on the water somewhere and get a sail up and feel the wind in my face. That would be fantastic. So that would be my ambition in the course of the next 6 to 8 weeks. That would be good. Guys, thank you very much, guys and girls, and Natalie. Thank you for answering those. We've got some questions coming down the Q&A side, so we're going to try and tackle a few of those, and I'm sure Fraser's going to interject when it is at the right moment to stand as so let's point some of these questions at individuals. We have a question here from Mark Stedman. Some directors wish cleaners to be visible when staff are there, so they feel confident the place is safe. At what point do you think health and safety are going to flag up the fact that many people are going to be within reach of open bottles of chemicals that can be harmful? Natalie, what do you think on this one?
I was hoping you weren't going to ask me this one, because I'm definitely not an FM expert. I think there's a balance between kind of having cleaners visible and people being around when the cleaning's being done, which is obviously makes it quite tough to giving people confidence. I think some of the others mentioned this before. So how do you give people confidence that something has been cleaned rather than having to see a cleaner? Can you put like a sign on desks to say whether it's been cleaned or not, or kind of put a log on the wall around when the clean was last done? So I think we've got to think about the practical elements of how you can give people that confidence, but without having to see a cleaner cleaning that desk right there and then. Probably how I'd answer it. Okay.
And then we've got 2 questions that have come in, one from Tom and one from Richard, which are quite closely associated. So there's 2 on my panel can see these, so they're looking at them now and waiting to hear. I'm going to ask Paul to answer these. And let me just read out the questions if for the benefit of the audience. So Tom was asking, what are thoughts about more local co-working community hubs rather than huge city centre, quote, Death Star enterprise hubs to help colleagues cut the commute? And the second question from Richard Bertram was, do the panel think there'll be a greater uptake of flexible space in the immediate future for the least benefits rather than co-working? So Paul, what do you think?
Well, I'll jump to Tom's question. It's clearly a big Star Wars fan, so but I'll ignore that and kind of move to the detail. Listen, I think we are very interested in this, and I think that there's, we have regional offices in the UK, just as an example, in Birmingham and Manchester. And my take is that, there will be, and both of those are big cities in themselves, but my take is that there will be a much greater request for people, living in an equidistant between London and those locations to utilise those offices, because for both of them, there is not such a reliance on kind of mass transit to get to work. So I do think that that's going to become prevalent. And as we look at our wider real estate strategy, particularly across the globe and in North America, in New York, we have operations in New Jersey, in a town called Morristown, just outside of New York City. And we think that office will become, more active as a result of this for the same reasons I've just described. To the point on Richard has mentioned, I mean, I found the whole emergence of the co-working industry just absolutely fascinating. And the story of WeWork and all of that, I just think has been kind of riveting reading over the last 24 months, and I'm sure it's going to be a film at one stage. But I they're going to struggle. I think they're going to come into a tough time. The guidance that I've got from brokers is that there might be a greater degree of space coming onto the market as a result of some of the smaller operations, not being able to survive crises like this. My view on is I think they are a wonderful addition to to organisations to use, and we indeed use them in certain locations across the globe. So I hope that they can navigate their way through this in a way that sees them, but it's going to be very, very interesting.
Thank you, Paul. Tony, I'm going to ask you. No, sorry, Adrian. I'm going to ask Adrian. So, oh my goodness me, I've lost the question. Would you believe? Technology at its finest. Right, here we go. So as a question came in from Paul Jenner, controversially, part of our business operates a photography studio, and we use models for various clients who need styling in advance. This is essential to our business. We have protocols and good controls in place. And also from the client side, what's the panel's advice, as we will need to breach social distancing to be able to carry out our business longer term? Adrian, what's your thinking?
Well, I'm intrigued, Peter, as to as you're asking me about advice on personal styling. So perhaps I can take that offline with you. But I think it's just it's a great example that in these times about the huge broad range of considerations that we are having to take on board and work through. And yeah, that's where this real balance is needed to, what lengths do we go to in order to enable something to happen now, versus actually just say, no, sorry, can't happen for another month. How much effort when does something become too difficult or too expensive or too risky to actually do now? And so, I think, like everything, risk-based approach to say, right, okay, what are the potential risks? How well can we mitigate them? And if we're a bit worried about the mitigations, then perhaps we have to say, no, we've got to hold off for a bit longer. Okay,
thank you very much indeed, Adrian, for that. One final question, which came in earlier on, actually, came in from Michael Grant from Metricus. And who haven't I asked? So Tony, it's going to be with you, I think. So he was asking how important it was that we understand occupancy capacity and air quality of our premises during these times. And again, I think we've touched on some of this as we've talked this morning, but air quality is a really interesting one. Any thoughts, Tony?
I mean, we're in a multiple occupancy building, so that's something that's been provided by the landlords. And of course, all of us as tenants have been putting pressure on the landlords to make sure that all of the services are compliant. And of course, what we found is that a lot of members of staff have also been very, very fearful about that. So, some people have come back saying that they want the windows to be open. Obviously, we know that you can't have windows open if you've got an air conditioning system. And we've been, because obviously one is going to fight the other. So we've also been trying to make sure that the air is pulled from the roof, and just done the best we can. But really, for me, what I found is that generally in the open plan areas, we're okay. And what I'm really trying to do is I'm trying to discourage people from using meeting rooms, he says, as he sits in a meeting room. Because obviously there's much more of a feeling, a perception of recycling air when you're close to each other. Now, obviously, we've got social distancing guidelines in place. We've removed chairs out of meeting rooms. We've done everything we can. But what we've also done is put special handles on the handles so that you don't need to touch anything with your hands. Everything can be done with elbows and everything else. But yeah, there's still a certain amount of recycling of air before it gets sucked in, blown out, and everything else. So it's a very important part, and it's a conversation you definitely need to have either with your HVAC engineers or your landlords, just so you can manage your expectation. Because if your staff haven't asked you yet, they certainly will do. You've got to make sure that you're as compliant and as reassuring as you can be for your staff.